Hello and welcome back to the Cozy Design Studio. I'm Nick and I talk about all things cozy. However, in today's video we're going to be talking about a topic which isn't very cozy at all, and that is free-to-play games. But before we get into all that, if you like this video and want to see more like it, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell so that YouTube knows you like my videos. But now, let's get into it. I'm going to start out assuming you know nothing about what I'm talking about when I say free to play. For those of you who do and don't want a refresher, you can go ahead and skip to this timestamp. For the rest of you, however, it may seem a bit odd for me to sit here and insinuate that free games could be a bad thing. After all, most of the mobile games that everyone loves are free, so what's so bad about not having to pay for your games? Well, as anyone who plays those mobile games will tell you, there is a difference between free to play and free. Free is when you find a sofa on the side of the road with a free sign on it and you call your buddy to bring his pickup truck so you can take it home. Free to play would be if a person came out and then said, yeah, you can have the frame of the couch, but the upholstery and the cushions and the filling for the cushions and the feet for the couch, you'll have to buy those separately. Now, it wouldn't technically be wrong to say that the couch was free, but if you just took the free part, you wouldn't really be having the experience of using a couch. You would just have a naked couch frame which you can't practically use. And it's the same with games. Free-to-play games give you the base game, but try to squeeze your money out of you by any number of unsavory tactics. Sometimes it's as innocuous as fun cosmetic items, but more often than not, it comes in the form of pay-to-win mechanics, which, as the name states, is things like offering a bigger, better gun which locks onto targets for you if you're willing to pay. So basically, you're paying to have an advantage at the game. Now, it's not always that on the nose, but you get the idea. Other times, games will have key features and mechanics locked behind a paywall, so while you can technically play the base game, you're not really having the experience of playing the game. You're playing an extremely cut down, crappy version of the game that everyone else who is willing to pay is playing. It would be like if Nintendo released Tears of the Kingdom for free and then charged you for all the different outfits, ultra hand abilities, and Sheikah Slate features. Sure, you're playing the game, but if you aren't willing or aren't able to pay for those features, you're going to be stuck on the ground with crappy rusty swords and shields while all your friends are warping all over the place, solving puzzles, and creating fun inventions. You're fundamentally not playing the same game, and while you are technically playing Tears of the Kingdom, it's not the way the game was intended to be played, and it completely ruins the experience of the game. Unfortunately, aside from some really great indie games, nothing in gaming is truly free. And I'll even make the fairly controversial statement that nothing in gaming should be free. Games take a lot of work, and if you want your game to be even close to good, they take a lot of time. So unless you happen to be a billionaire's kid and have nothing better going on, most people can't afford to put in that work without at least a concept of a plan for monetization. But, by and large, those aren't the people making free-to-play games. No, most indie games are somewhere in the $20 to $30 price range, if not less, which honestly seems like a bit of a low price for some of these masterpieces, but as we just went over, games are a huge upfront investment with little if any guarantee on return. So, if these smaller and even medium-sized studios can't afford that investment, the only ones left are the massive players. Giant multinational companies like Tencent, Konami, and Epic. And you can bet your butt they aren't looking to simply sink money into a game and then give it away totally free out of the goodness of their heart. In fact, a lot of the times they're legally obligated not to, so how is it they're able to do it then? Well, I'll come back to the example of the humble mobile game. If you've spent any amount of time playing mobile games, you'll know exactly how they fund development. Microtransactions. A microtransaction is, as the name implies, any small purchase you make in a game or program after the initial purchase. Now, this differs from DLC or downloadable content, which is usually much larger in scope and more expensive than a microtransaction. Keyword being usually. Think of it like this. A DLC is a whole new pack of maps, or like a 10-hour expansion to the story, whereas a microtransaction is a new skin or a ship or cosmetic item. Now, this gets even more confused by the fact that some games will list microtransactions in Steam as DLC, but you can think of it kind of like the relationship between a rectangle and a square. All microtransactions are technically DLC, but not all DLC are microtransactions. But okay, I mean, if the game is free, and like I just said, games take a lot of time and hard work to make, why should I be bothered by microtransactions? It's a way to let me play the game for free and only pay for it if I really like it or if there's something that I really want to use, kind of like an extended demo. And honestly, in that very specific scenario, I agree. Unfortunately, that isn't the path most free-to-play games take, because, like we talked about, they need to make up for all the money that they spent in development. And they're made by companies, oftentimes publicly held companies, which means they have one and only one priority: money. And that means simply making up the cost of development isn't enough. They need to make as much profit as possible. And they've gotten very good and very creative with how exactly they go about doing that. Now, those of you who have been gaming for most of your lives will remember around the 2010s when loot boxes were the industry con of choice. For those of you who weren't there for that, loot boxes are basically a digital version of blind boxes. The mechanic is exactly the same. You buy a box with the hope of getting that really desirable prize inside. However, the people selling the boxes know exactly which designs you want, and, in fact, design them to be specifically appealing to the largest demographic of their customers. And then they make those designs the rarest. This drives people to keep buying boxes until they get the one that they're looking for. And if you combine that with the internet's collective fascination with unboxing and haul content, you've got yourself a bona fide money printing machine. Now, these blind boxes are still somehow legal in the real, non-video game world, and I think technically still legal in video games as well, but on the whole, the industry has moved past this incredibly dishonest and scummy money extraction scheme. But the base mechanism remains. One of the biggest things that makes loot or blind boxes work, and which makes them such lucrative investments, is the social cost of not participating. And this really is the most scummy part of the practice. We as humans are extremely socially driven. Most of the choices that we make are influenced by the people around us, which we identify as part of the in-group. Things like blind boxes and loot boxes hijack that evolutionary pipeline. They drum up superficial demand through online marketing strategies and exploitative designs to create incentives that are reinforced by the people within our social group. Put simply, they use the fact that you care about what the people around you think to make you feel like if you don't have that one thing, that you're not a valued member of whatever community you're a part of. And that is a very powerful tool. It's one large-scale organized religions and governments have been using for literally thousands of years. Get someone invested enough in a community, and they'll do anything to stay in it, no matter the cost. So while loot boxes per se are, for the most part, a thing of the past and have largely been relegated to the gaming garbage disposal that is crappy mobile games, don't kid yourself. These companies know exactly how powerful this strategy is, and even though the gaming world has mostly rejected loot boxes for their extremely blatantly harmful gambling mechanics, that just made the marketing teams at these companies think a little bit harder about how to sneak the actual base mechanic under the radar. And boy, has it worked. And I can't think of a better example to use to illustrate this than Fortnite. Alright, firstly, Fortnite is by no means the first or last game to use these strategies, so I'm not trying to single it out as uniquely troublesome. It's simply the example that I'm most familiar with, and it's one that a fair few people close to me have a lot of experience in. So don't take this as me shitting on people who play Fortnite. We all like the games we like, and I'm not here to shame you for those choices. But I do think it's a great example of exactly what I'm talking about. If you're not familiar, Fortnite is a free-to-play battle royale third-person shooter. Battle royale just basically means that it's a fight to the last survivor. Think Hunger Games. But it wasn't always that. In fact, Fortnite started out as a zombie base defense game. It just kind of had a side mode, which was this battle royale thing. Now, at the time, the battle royale du jour was PUBG, a gritty, realistic military shooter. So Fortnite's battle royale mode stood out for its more cartoony, kid-friendly graphical style. And we will be circling back to that in a bit because it's a bit more relevant than it might seem. But Fortnite quickly grew in popularity, eventually dethroning PUBG. How did they do this? Well, it certainly didn't hurt that they offered the game for free, whereas PUBG you needed to put down money up front. It also helped that Fortnite was developed by Epic, the company behind the Unreal Engine, a game development engine used by many developers to make their games. And they also have a tiny little game distribution platform called the Epic Game Store. So, as any smart company does, they diversified. They could afford to release Fortnite for free because they had the money coming in from all their other revenue sources. But that clearly wasn't enough for the people at the top, so they implemented a fairly innocuous business model, which was basically to just sell skins to the players of the game. You get the game totally free, and if you want, you can grab a cool skin here or there to support the developer of your favorite pastime. And I mean, it's hard to argue with that. The devs do actually have to do work on the game to support it because it's an online game, and the bigger it gets, the more work you need to do, and the more investment needs to go into the back end. So letting players help fund that makes perfect sense, and I'm genuinely not against it. However, as business people do, they couldn't leave well enough alone and decided they would lean on the social dynamics popping up around the game and all the cool skins that you could buy for your character, eventually turning to well-established franchises and celebrities. As it is today, if you were to hop into a match, you would be hard-pressed to find anyone playing with the base skin. Most people who play have at least one skin, and far more have many. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not shaming these people for spending money on their favorite game. In fact, I think of all the games to use this strategy, Fortnite is probably one of the better examples. Because they have those other revenue sources, they can really afford to give you the exact same experience from a mechanical standpoint as any other player, even if you don't want to spend a dime on skins. And for that, I applaud the devs. It shows a fair bit of restraint, and I always want to give credit where it's due. However, if we circle back to that thing that I said earlier about Fortnite being particularly kid-friendly from a graphical standpoint, we can start to see what it is about this business model that makes it so negative. For one, these skins cost anywhere between $8 and $20 a pop, and you best believe the most desirable skins, the licensed brand deals and cool comic book characters, are very much more on the $20 side. But let's be generous and say that the average skin is maybe $10. Some quick napkin math tells us that it would only take 6 skins to have paid the exact same price as a full AAA game. And you best believe 6 is on the absolute lowest end of how many skins the average player has. Based on a quick Google search, it looks like the lower end of skin ownership is somewhere around 10 to 20, whereas the higher end is conservatively in the hundreds. So again, if we take that fairly conservative estimate of $10 per skin on average, that's anywhere from double the amount you would expect to pay for a game to over 30 times what you might expect to pay. Now, for adults, this is fine. You spend your money on whatever you want. It's your life. However, it doesn't take long in the voice chat to see just how many players are either using voice changers to sound like they're 8 to 10-year-olds, which seems fairly unrealistic, or they actually are that young. In which case, this isn't their money, it's their parents. And frankly, I don't care about the actual money spent. What is worrying is that these kinds of behaviors are extremely addictive, and children engaging with them at such early ages has detrimental effects on the ways that their brains develop. Now, the statistics that get thrown around on the internet say that about 60% of the players of Fortnite are between 18 and 25, so if we give those stats the benefit of the doubt and assume they're 100% true, Fortnite isn't really all that bad for this issue. So again, I'm not coming for Fortnite specifically. This isn't a hit piece on Epic or anything like that, but Fortnite has shown just how lucrative this business model can be. And speaking frankly, while I'm sure if you ask the people individually at these companies, they would say they care about the kids and don't want to drive them into addictive tendencies, they also have absolutely zero incentive to do anything but turn a blind eye. Either Even if you don't care about the kids though, this kind of business model is bad for games as a whole. Sure, it's great for the top 3 companies who can make it work, but by and large, free-to-play games utterly fail to live up to the promise, and even worse, they poison the expectation of what a successful game even is. We've seen far too many studios shut their doors because the suits thought that the frankly phenomenal success of the games that they put out just wasn't enough. And we've seen game after game get completely gutted when an exec comes in and decides it should be a free-to-play money-making machine instead of what it actually is, a game. Things like Suicide Squad, Concord, and Destiny all succumbed to the same flawed business model, and all 3 of those didn't even offer the game for free. It's very clear at this point that when games are designed in order to incorporate these free-to-play schemes, they just don't work. You simply can't have a good game if you have to strip away everything but the frame and slowly sell everything back to the player. Now, there are of course examples of it working to great effect, Fortnite being a huge one. But just like in gambling, someone is going to win, it's just definitely not going to be you. So in a weird twist of irony, the business people pushing these business models seem to be falling for exactly the same flawed reasoning they were using to take advantage of people buying loot boxes. They think for sure this gamble will pay off eventually, and when it does, it'll pay off big. But as is usually the case, it's just another flop. And frankly, I don't care about the money. I don't care if you want to spend every last dollar you have trying to get that one rare blind box item. I don't care if you want to buy all the skins in Fortnite and take out a second mortgage on your house to do it. I don't care if all these execs fall flat on their face trying to make it work. I really don't. What I care about is games, and it's become all too clear that this strategy is slowly killing a lot of games that have a lot of promise as games and not as money-making schemes. I'm by no means saying that the games industry is on the way out, or that games are suddenly going to stop existing. For every crappy free-to-play title, there are 5 amazing indie games no one is looking at on Steam. So I certainly don't want this to sound alarmist or like I'm saying games are dead. They most definitely aren't. I'm just saying that I personally think if you want to do something to support the games industry and you want to find some amazing titles that you can actually love and not just kind of get sucked into a sunk cost fallacy black hole, free-to-play games ain't it. I'm not saying you aren't a real gamer if you like free-to-play games. As far as I'm concerned, if you play games, you're a gamer. It's that simple. But I just think that if you care about the art of video games and you appreciate the love that goes into them, you would be much better served by things like small indie titles which don't ask you to continually pay them to give you a good experience. Hollow Knight Silksong just released and it's only like $20. I've covered all kinds of indie games which give you, in my mind anyway, infinitely more value than any free-to-play game ever could. I don't want to paint them as morally wrong, or people who play them as just dumb consumerist sheep, because there is real value there. I just think that there's far more to be had in games which attempt to simply give you an experience and don't expect you to pay through the nose for it. And that's what's so frustrating about free-to-play games and the model as a whole. It could be great, it could be a wholesome community funding take on game development, and it definitely does still have potential for that. But as always, as long as it's spearheaded by these massive corporations, the bottom line will always be infinitely increasing profits, and that will always lead to worse games. So that's it. That's my thoughts on free-to-play games. I don't know if any of you found this convincing or what you all think of my thoughts, but make sure you leave yours in the comments. I always love hearing what you have to say. If you like these videos and you want to see more like them, make sure you like, subscribe, and ring the bell so YouTube knows you like my videos. But other than that, I'll just say thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, happy gaming.